Hey everyone, hope you all had a really great lunch. I'm super excited to be here with all of you today. We've got a fantastic afternoon of speakers, so I hope you're still excited and hanging in there. Woo! All right. And I'm really humbled to be here and talking to you today about onboarding. For those of you I haven't met yet, my name is Cindy, and I'm a senior product designer at Intercom. Anyone here heard of Intercom? Quick show of hands. Woo! Fans in the house? Cool. Well, in case you're not familiar, Intercom is one place for every team in an internet business to communicate personally with customers at scale. In your website, web and mobile apps, on email, a lot of sales, support, and marketing teams use us. Now, I've been at Intercom for about 3 years now. And as I was putting together this talk, I spent some time looking back and reflecting on things. 3 years is pretty short in the grand scheme of it all, but it feels a little bit longer at Intercom where things happen and change so quickly. 3 years ago, we were a much smaller team, about 200 some odd people spread between Dublin and San Francisco. Today, we're closer to 650, with offices in Dublin, San Francisco, but also London, Chicago, and Sydney. 3 years ago, we were all about the cute animals. Anyone remember these? Yeah, I love them. But since then, we've pivoted to a different kind of illustration style, and most recently, once again, to something more drastically different, simpler, clearer, and more mature. 3 years ago, we were, dare I say, a simpler, maybe less powerful, less fully realized product, just a simple messenger where your customers could message you and you could respond. But today we have our business messenger, our team inbox, we have our help center, we've got reporting, apps and integrations, an app framework, we have custom chatbots and answer bots, and we have product tours, all of this stuff. It's so amazing that we've gotten more powerful in our tools over time. But it's also fair to say that we've gotten just a little bit more complicated. All of this is really great, but it can be kind of hard to understand and a little overwhelming if you're just trying out Intercom for the first time. So over time, it's become more and more important for us to help new customers be successful in our product with good onboarding. Now, the great thing about onboarding is it's a universal software problem. So chances are you'll probably encounter it at some point in your careers. The less great thing about onboarding, in my humble opinion, is it's a bit of an iceberg problem, something that seems smaller and simpler up front than it is under the surface. But that's why you're here, right? So let's get started and talk about what I mean by onboarding. I feel like no talk about onboarding is complete without Samuel Hulek of User Onboard's Super Mario reference. Anyone seen this before? Cool. People don't buy your product, they buy better versions of themselves. This is classic jobs to be done, and onboarding is really needed to help people become that better version of themselves. But it's not just the first 3 screens you see after sign up. It might be that. But the best onboarding is the equivalent of a white glove service, where you're really holding your customer's hand and guiding them to see various different features in your product, listening to their intentions, and helping them find the right match. It's a way to grow your business that's less like the instruction manual that comes with your gym equipment, but more like the personal trainer that's helping you reach your fitness goals. But wait, there's more. You can't just consider a customer's first day. You have to think in weeks, months, and years after that first impression. And throughout it all, your customers need a really cohesive experience so that they ultimately become a more confident power user, continuing to uncover value in your product over time. Now, I don't know what it's like where you work, but all that stuff that I just said, not easy. That stuff is hard. For us at Intercom, that kind of cohesive onboarding experience remit spans several teams. Sales, marketing, product, customer engagement, biz ops. But with so much responsibility spread throughout a company, especially with offices in different time zones and all that stuff, it's not always easy to come up with that cohesive onboarding experience that your customers deserve, and most importantly, that your business craves. I'm telling you this because obviously we discovered this the hard way, otherwise I wouldn't be here today. With no one to oversee a holistic onboarding for Intercom, over time, our onboarding experience began to kind of reveal the seams of our organization in different periods of time, little cuts here and there. So new Intercom customers didn't know where to start, and they couldn't see value quickly enough. With our most recent iteration of onboarding, we had a series of setup checklists. And these were kind of split across different products in different tabs, as you can kind of see here. But the system was designed to solve a very specific problem at a very specific time. So it was difficult to kind of adapt this as we shipped new product and we made changes to our business. For instance, when we started to sell bundles of product that didn't actually mention the actual product names themselves, we couldn't expect customers to know where to click to get started, let alone kind of what they were getting into. Now, some of this stemmed from lack of proper resourcing. We just hadn't invested in onboarding at that time as a system. And it didn't help that the people who actually built the setup checklist sat like 8 hours away in a different product org than the people who actually built the products. And they didn't talk to each other much, which happens. So you can kind of see where I'm coming from here. So as a result, the closest that most of the product teams actually got to onboarding was just kind of like YOLOing their own patterns here and there for a certain product launch, using inconsistent guiding principles and also different tones of voice from our partners in sales and customer support and customer engagement who play critical roles in a customer's onboarding journey. So clearly, there was a lot that needed fixing. So we asked ourselves, how do you empower different product teams and functions to input and own their own onboarding for their parts of the product, but still have this cohesive onboarding experience that helps customers see value quickly and stay engaged over time? To answer that, we made a few big changes, some org and some product changes. I'll take you through where we ended up and then get into more specifics as I share out 5 lessons that we learned along the way. So first things first, we formed an onboarding product team dedicated to overseeing Intercom's end-to-end onboarding experience. The idea was that this team was able to take inputs and functions, inputs from functions like sales and marketing, as well as other product teams, and use that to create a scalable, long-term onboarding narrative and vision for Intercom. But rather than just have our team own all of onboarding, which for a complex product like Intercom is neither realistically feasible nor just a very good idea, essentially our remit as a team was to kind of be like a systems team, to come up with a holistic onboarding solution and then empower other product teams to be able to easily contribute and own their own aspects of the onboarding flow such that it all hangs together. To that end, we rethought how our onboarding could work in the product and how it could adapt over time. Say as we added a new product or we pivoted in how we priced and packaged things, because we knew we couldn't get it right on the first try. We were going to make mistakes. And because we didn't want to just like rip out and rebuild the existing solution, which is like the pattern that we had had before. We really wanted something that was really scalable and modular. So the first thing that we shipped was a permanent place within Intercom, right when you get started, for all new customers to start setting up Intercom. We call this onboarding home. And the idea is that you'd go through it, and then over time, we get customers to come back to it. As we add new content, new features, this place would continually evolve. And potentially over time, you would see the ROI of the setup actions you took here, and you can start seeing how Intercom is working for you. Onboarding Home is made up of a modular framework, a library of bite-sized onboarding steps that can be kind of collapsed and expanded. And these steps are contained inside levels, which are designed to get customers to see value about a certain topic without overwhelming them. We drew inspiration here from video games. where you have like level 1 and unlocks level 2, and so on and so forth, until by the end, you become a master of some sorts. We also lean into the idea of learning by doing contextually in the product. So in our new model, there are some kind of one-and-done steps, or steps that are done early on in the customer's journey that can just be taken directly on home so they don't get too overwhelmed with the product too quickly. But more often, from a step, clicking on it actually takes the customer directly into the real product to learn in context with additional kind of guidance from things like product tours and banners. We also created an onboarding design system. And as we work through how to represent specific onboarding content, we created guiding principles and templates and examples and things like that to actually figure out how to design and build out the steps and levels. This not only made ourselves really scalable as a team for other teams to be able to look at this and contribute, but with these principles and patterns that we developed, we could in fact actually change onboarding more easily based on experimentation or other business needs. For example, here we could have a handful of onboarding steps and kind of put them inside a level. But we could take out a step if it feels extra. And if we added new products or change stuff, we can just create more steps, and our onboarding system can always adapt. And if we knew what the customer's intent was behind using Intercom, we could even tailor their onboarding a little bit so that the steps and levels would be more tailored to them. So where we're at now is an A/B test of this experience with a certain segment of our customers, and we're adding more content to it over time. But the reception has been good. We're seeing lifts in our activation rates, so we're continuing to invest in this framework and build it out with other teams. So, all that. What did we learn along the way? Again, as I said before, I'll share 5 learnings from a design perspective, working on both the onboarding flow and the framework. So the first thing, start by understanding customer aha moments. The heart of onboarding is figuring out what content to show to which customers and when. Assuming you have a target customer segment, start learning what really, really speaks to them. What are those delighters, those eureka, aha moments where they go, oh, I get it now. And lean into that at the beginning of your onboarding flow to help folks stick around and get on with your product. For example, at the beginning of this project, we did some customer studies, and we learned that a big aha moment for our customers was seeing how the messenger that their customers would use and the inbox that they use actually work together, because that was core to their Intercom workflow. So we got quotes like this, and another one here, where people just want to see what it looks like for their customers and in the app, and that's when they knew, this is what they're looking for. But we also knew that it would be time-consuming and difficult for customers to actually get to that point, because to have conversations in your actual inbox, you need to actually install the messenger for real on your website, and then chat in through there. So that might require time and help from a developer, which not everyone has. And so for our onboarding, we made the third step that you see actually be this kind of standalone site where we actually pre-install the customer's actual messenger right there, so they can actually go and test it out and have a real conversation in their actual inbox. And this made it really clear for them to understand immediately how Intercom worked and use the real deal without having to do anything and set up anything at all. So 2, draw perspectives from cross-functional partners. What you introduce to customers in onboarding is kind of a delicate balance. Too little, and customers don't know what you're all about. And too much, and customers will be ridiculously overwhelmed and just bounce. As a designer, I found it here really helpful to collaborate with my partners in analytics, customer success, and sales, to figure out what onboarding steps actually matter, actually correlate with real customer success, and double down on those. Myself and the product manager in this project, we had our own lists of what customers should go through. We checked this with PMs from different parts of Intercom, but we also chatted with customer success managers who have their own checklists, as well as account executives to get their version of an onboarding checklist that they walk through with new customers. And finally, most importantly, actually, we partnered with a product analyst to comb through the data and learn what things people did in our product actually correlated with activation, which we were using as an early indicator for retention. As we cross-checked all this data, we added in 2 additional steps in one of our onboarding levels after installing the messenger, which is around setting up an outbound message and inviting other teammates to join. We had gotten some questions from leadership asking, in the very beginning whether we really needed this. But it was after having all these chats with people and having different perspectives, it was super clear to us what would actually make the cut and what wouldn't. 3, connect the dots with a value-driven narrative. So maybe by now you have an idea of what content to include in your onboarding, you've talked to people and all that. The question now becomes, how do you actually group and organize all this content so you don't overwhelm customers and you make it clearly obvious what value they're going to get from it? For this, you may want to think of onboarding as a narrative. It is, after all, a story of behavior change and how hopefully your customers will start seeing some sort of difference in your product or start some sort of difference in their lives via your product. I'll share 2 examples of how we considered onboarding as a narrative. The first is how we grouped and ordered levels within onboarding home. So here we once again made sure to work really closely with our go-to-market partners because the flow in onboarding had to be so strongly connected with the flow that they were seeing and the narrative they were getting in the marketing experience. So we did an IA exercise with 2 account executives for our target segment and talked to sales managers as well. From all this, we chunked up the narrative that we heard into 3 kind of distinct buckets in a customer's journey. And we mapped the content toward that. So the first is intercom basics, which are the bare bone fundamental concepts that you really have to understand for intercom. Next is build on the basic, the additional basic setup for teammates to get started on the thing that they bought. And then finally, master intercom, which is all the other additional levels that are a bit more use case specific, a bit more advanced, that can be filtered and prioritized. The second thing we learned related to this point was how to actually heavily emphasize the value that people were going to get in the copy of each onboarding step. So along with a content designer, we worked to refine the tone of voice and the actual copy. So the whole thing kind of felt more like a flow within each step and within each level and then overall, so that customers always understand what they're going to do, why they should do it, and how it relates to what they already know. Here you can see a really old version compared to the actual version. This was a little bit different from how we normally write functional product copy, which tends to be a bit more terse. But you can see the new version is so much clearer and so much more outcome focused, which is really what matters at the end of the day. 4, know when to bend and rewrite the rules. Because onboarding sits between your marketing site and your ongoing product, it might require borrowing bits of both to create a connecting bridge for your customer. And that means you might have to adapt some of the patterns that you normally use in your day-to-day product. So one stylistic difference, for example, in our onboarding system compared to our product design system is the use of photography in product. Namely bringing this guy, Phil, who's our customer engagement lead, directly into the product as the first thing you see when you land. And we had no kind of large faces of people from our company in the product at all beforehand, but because Intercom is all about kind of trying to make internet business feel a little bit more personal, we have names and faces everywhere. We wanted to test this out, and we ultimately rolled out with Phil in the product. We had good reason to kind of deviate a little bit. So in onboarding, you get all your kind of content from Phil, and then you get emails and little in-app messages also from Phil, and so you have that one-to-one kind of strengthening of that relationship. And we thought about ways to take this further, like maybe it's someone's relationship manager instead of Phil eventually. And basically, we just really liked the idea of this one-to-one relationship strengthening. It spoke to us really well. But it's not enough just to kind of bend the rules and rewrite them and leave them sitting in a corner. One thing I also learned here is it's just in relation to creating an onboarding framework, you really have to share specific examples and do's and don'ts and really make it super clear what we mean and share these with the teams that you're working with and have AMAs and meetings and chances for them to kind of come into the conversation as well so they can really start thinking in the same way. And finally, use your one chance wisely. More than other products that you might work on, onboarding is super data-driven. And so when it comes to testing assumptions you made, sometimes you have to make a call on whether something is good enough to test with customers or not. And above all, my advice here is to just periodically take a step back and really, really remember your brand new customer. And don't ship anything janky at the expense of shipping faster, because quality really matters on your first shot. So in our project, we were working really hard on making sure everything was right. We had the right patterns, the build was good, and we spent a lot of time QAing like functionality, but we belatedly didn't realize we didn't QA the actual experience. And this sounds a bit obvious, but in the moment, your vision might get kind of cloudy. So after all, we're all human. So we were in an end-to-end review with leadership when they pointed out some stuff that we had built kind of looked janky. And among other things, there was this confetti animation that I'll play here after a level is complete. And we were reusing something from a part of our product that already existed. But it kind of just falls, and it's not that nice. And so we really took a step back and realized, hey, this is a new customer. It really matters. And so we hustled and polished it up. And the new version is just so much more delightful. Real confetti, right? Yeah. Nice. I like the applause. So the moral of the story is we were trying to get it out there and learn from customers, but maybe with a janky build, the data that we would have gotten might not have been worth collecting in the first place. So if it happens to you in your onboarding, keep that new customer mindset top of mind. Walk 100 miles, right, in their shoes. It might be good to get other people to do it from your company who haven't seen this before, or try doing onboarding in spurts. That really happens in the real world. Whatever like that can be helpful. So to recap, here's what we learned. Start by understanding aha moments, drawing perspectives from different partners, clicking this, connecting the dots to form a value-driven narrative, know how to bend and rewrite the rules, and then use your one chance wisely. And following this talk, if you're at all inspired, I'd encourage you to think about your own product experience and your own customer journey. Are there any kind of gaps or inconsistencies, and why may they have come up in the first place? You might want to think about investing in time to establish an onboarding strategy in your product and consider how it could adapt over time to your needs. And in the end, I just can't stress enough how much onboarding matters and how much it is a real universal software problem, in my opinion. So if you're really serious about creating a great product, you have to have the people, the resources, and the tools to really do it right. Thank you.
We have some good questions for you. The one with the most votes is, how much is too much onboarding? And how do you decide where to draw the line?
That's a good question. Some of my pet peeves are when you actually need product training and you have certifications and everything for a product, so that might be too much onboarding.
Okay.
I think every product could benefit from some sort of lightweight onboarding to really just get people in really quickly. But onboarding shouldn't be used as a Band-Aid, I think, for covering up a bad product in the first place. And so when it comes to figuring out what your priorities are, I think there's a conversation that needs to be had in terms of what size of these problems are you really seeing? Should they be fixed by real kind of product improvements, which I think, in my opinion, we should start there and look at that. But onboarding is I think, can be really helpful as a way to, at some point, at Intercom, we try to keep our experience simple. We have patterns and principles in how we work that really try to make it so that we're using things from our existing system and keeping things as simple as possible. But even then, it can be hard. And in B2B especially, there's like, your products can be just naturally complex. And so onboarding might be helpful in that case. Yeah.
What do you say to those people that say that onboarding is just a Band-Aid for bad design or a poorly designed product?
It's a good question. I think that it's not always the case. Sometimes, like, it is kind of covering up for some stuff, but I think at the end of the day, like, we should take a step back and think about, like, the customer, and if a customer can benefit from the experience or not. And if the customer can benefit from it, like, we should try everything that we can to really make sure that that's a really good experience for them, because that's ultimately kind of what matters at the end of the day.
Okay. This next one is overloaded. They got 3 questions in one, so I'm going to have to pick out of this, but it's really good. Where did the onboarding home live? And they mean in the product, not in the org.
Yeah.
You know, was it its own macro menu item?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. So we actually in the side nav had like the Intercom logo and then all the products underneath. And for a while, clicking on the Intercom logo actually just brought you to the first thing in the navigation, which is like a little bit strange. So the onboarding home actually lived behind the Intercom logo.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what metrics did you use to measure the success of the onboarding?
Yeah, great question. So we had a bunch of different metrics. Our primary one was looking at activation, and activation we had previously defined. We have a bunch of different use cases and activation metrics for those, and so for our target segment, it was activation on any one of those use cases. But we also had lots of secondary metrics like messenger installation and other kind of more business metrics that we were using as well. Some of them we were like monitoring just to make sure they don't go down. Some of them we were explicitly keeping track of.
Okay.
Yeah.
And thirdly, if you're shipping a version 1 product, should you add onboarding? Or should you do things that don't scale and just do it personally to learn what works?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if you're just shipping a version 1 product, you're probably looking for things like, does it actually solve the problem? Like, that's most important. And so I think like lots of themes that are coming up today are like, how can we think big but start small? And that's definitely true at Intercom. So I would recommend just like starting with the smallest possible thing.
Okay.
And like you probably don't need onboarding, and just try to figure out what's the lightest way to test it as much as possible.
There's a lot of love around the word janky.
Yes.
We're getting that here.
Okay.
It's coming in.
Good to know.
As a PM, it's sometimes hard to draw the line between the day-to-day and future vision in a fast-paced team. At a smaller scale, less than 50-person product team, should we consider putting other initiatives on hold to focus on onboarding, or run in parallel with a small dedicated team?
Yeah, I think I might answer this in a similar way. I don't know like what the nature of your business is and all that stuff. And I think ultimately, like, the thing that you should think about is, like, what are the ways that we can learn from our customers, and what would our customers kind of benefit from the most? If it really is, like, that you're seeing, like, some sort of problem in your customers and they can't get started really, really quickly, and you kind of decide that this is the way to do it, like, what's the smallest way to test it, especially if it's like a 50-person, like, kind of small startup being really scrappy, trying to figure out how we can learn as much as possible.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And now a question about your onboarding product team.
Yeah.
Were they totally dedicated and focused on the onboarding strategy, or was it a temporarily formed task force?
No, so it was a permanent team. Everyone was dedicated to it. We had like versions of this kind of spun up in the past, but they were more like these temporary task force types of things. Mm-hmm. So the team is dedicated. We actually are growing the team as well, as we're starting to work more with other parts of other product teams and other places. So it's going to be like a longer lasting kind of team for now.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Cindy.
Thanks, yeah.
Great.